Attention to those with bad habits. When a stranger gets too close, make sure to steer clear and avoid any confrontation. You may not even get a chance to regret it.
야, 죽을래? 내가? 새끼가 이게...
However, the killer didn't stop there. He climbed into the victim's car. The woman, busy touching up her makeup, thought it was just her companion returning. What she didn't know was that death was waiting for her. The whole horrific event played out right before the eyes of a girl nearby. The next morning, the police received a report. 2 bodies, heads down, were found inside a black sedan. Detective Dae-yeong, familiar with this brutal method, instantly recognized it as the work of a certain man, but his team assured him that they'd been watching the suspect all night. There was no opportunity for him to commit the murder. Dae-yeong wasn't convinced, and he had the suspect, Gi-beom, brought in for questioning.
생사람 잡고 있는 거 잘 아시죠?
모르겠는데 워낙 신출 규모란 분이시라.
애밤에 밖에 안 나갔으니까 카메라 지킬 일도 없고 빵꾸석에서 TV만 쳐보고 놀아서 본방들 시간대별로 독후감 쓸 수도 있고.
Gi-beom's arrogance grated on Dae-yeong, but there was no concrete evidence to pin the murders on him, so the interrogation went through the motions. As Gi-beom left, he crossed paths with a young woman. His true, menacing nature resurfaced, but he quickly suppressed it, realizing that he couldn't expose himself in such a public setting. What he didn't know was that the woman was actually a witness to the crime. Though she didn't speak up, her eyes betrayed a chilling intensity of burning desire for vengeance. Years ago, Gi-beom and his partner grew up in an orphanage together. They shared a dark bond, taking pleasure in killing animals. As they grew older, their interests shifted to killing humans, turning it into a sick, twisted competition. During an investigation into their crimes, Hee-joo's father became an unexpected target. One evening, as he walked, he felt a sharp pain. Someone had slashed his throat. As he staggered, struggling to stay on his feet, he tried to pursue his attacker but collapsed. His last thought was to see his daughter one final time. Dae-yeong arrived, holding a birthday cake, ready to celebrate his partner's birthday. But to his horror, he discovered that his partner had already died. With his daughter, Hee-joo, still by his side, the little girl, unaware of her father's death, waited for him to wake up so they could celebrate together. Witnessing this, Gi-beom felt a deep ache in his chest. He'd assumed the killer would get away with it, but unexpectedly, the killer was exposed and brought to trial. Gi-beom had committed 7 murders in just a few months, but there was only evidence for this one. As a result, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The victims' families could barely process the outcome, and Dae-yeong was enraged, his fists clenched, burning with a desire for revenge. He made a vow that Gi-beom would pay for his crimes. Young Hee-joo, witnessing all of this, etched the killer's face into her memory. But while everyone was engulfed in grief, they failed to notice a man lurking in the shadows. Only Gi-beom knew that the one who betrayed him and sent him to prison was his former close friend. Both men shared a twisted passion, one that extended to women. His friend fell in love with Gi-beom's girlfriend, and when Gi-beom found out, he was consumed with rage and tortured her to death. Later, Gi-beom planned to take revenge on his partner, but before he could act, his partner struck first, sending him to prison. Now, 15 years later, Gi-beom is released from prison. The first person to greet him is Dae-yeong, who was determined to send him back behind bars.
너 안에 있는 동안 담뱃값 4번 인상됐거든.
아직도 내가 다 죽였다고 생각하십니까? 미친.
Clearly, Dae-yeong hasn't let go of the events from 15 years ago, but Gi-beom still refuses to admit his crimes, so Dae-yeong orders his team to monitor Gi-beom 24/7. Before all this, Dae-yeong made everyone hand over 10,000 Korean won, which he quietly pocketed. The rookie thought his superior was blatantly extorting money, but he only realized what was going on when he saw Dae-yeong hand a thick envelope to the girl, who turned out to be a grown-up Hee-joo. Over the past 15 years, Hee-joo, now an orphan, hadn't been sent to an orphanage. Instead, everyone in the police department had pitched in to support her and raise her. As she grew up, Hee-joo became a thoughtful and compassionate young woman, beloved by everyone in the station. She was like an angel, hardworking and sweet. For years, Hee-joo kept a close eye on the mother who had abandoned her. Her feelings toward her mother were mixed with love and hatred, yet she couldn't stand to see her mother suffer. So, her stepfather, who frequently abused her mother, always felt an inexplicable unease around her.
얘가 참 잊을만 하면 순서 잘라먹고 나타나고 지랄을 떨어 확 그냥.
아저씨 곧 죽을 거예요.
What he didn't know was that Hee-joo had never forgotten the bloody revenge she sought for her father's death. The moment she heard that Gi-beom had been released from prison, the elaborate revenge plan she had carefully crafted over the years finally began. She had been keeping a close watch on Gi-beom, but that night, she unexpectedly discovered the presence of another man. She noticed that the man's methods were strikingly similar to Gi-beom's killing techniques, and a new plan began to take shape in her mind, to frame Gi-beom for the man's crimes. But things didn't go as planned, and so she moved on to the next phase of her plan to kill her stepfather, the man who had abused her mother for years. Hee-joo had watched her mother suffer for so long that the pain had become unbearable. Now, she could use this man to frame Gi-beom. From her observations, Hee-joo knew that Gi-beom was an early riser and liked to jog through a park every morning. She decided to drag the body to the park, hoping to frame Gi-beom, who already had a criminal record. When Gi-beom arrived, shocked to see the victim's manner of death, he recognized it as his signature killing method. Someone was clearly imitating him, making him the prime suspect in the police's investigation. He suspected that the person responsible was hiding somewhere nearby. Sure enough, he spotted a suspicious figure lurking in the shadows and, without giving away his intentions, prepared to give chase. The mysterious figure quickly turned and ran, and thus began a tense game of cat and mouse. Despite Gi-beom's long legs and his daily 10-kilometer runs, he couldn't keep up with the speedy, short-legged figure in front of him. Soon, Gi-beom lost track of his target, but the figure managed to keep ahead none other than Hee-joo herself. Her goal? To test the physical difference between herself and Gi-beom, so she could better execute her revenge plan. A series of murders kept appearing, all with methods strikingly similar to Gi-beom's from years ago, but the police couldn't find any concrete evidence linking Gi-beom to the crimes. Furious, Dae-yeong decided to confront Gi-beom again. He found him casually eating noodles, which only made Dae-yeong's anger flare up. In a fit of rage, Dae-yeong dumped an entire jar of chili powder into Gi-beom's bowl, but Gi-beom didn't flinch. He calmly continued eating and even sprinkled salt into Dae-yeong's wounds once he was done. Gi-beom mocked him, saying, "If it hadn't been for your partner filling in for you, it might have been you who died that night."
아버지. 무사? 넌 재밌지? 남반장도 내 손에 뒤지기 전까지 너처럼 사람 참 질리게 했어? 너한테만 말해준 거다. 다시 기소 안 되는 거 잘 알지?
Despite the law having no way of touching him, Gi-beom's arrogance and defiance only seemed to make Dae-yeong burn with more anger. He was ready to take justice into his own hands, but reality was harsh. It wasn't that simple. Later that night, back at his place, Gi-beom sensed someone quietly opening the door. He immediately turned off his phone. The uninvited guest slipped and it was none other than Gi-beom's old friend and partner. The two, familiar with each other's tactics, began a silent confrontation. The man said nothing, knowing that every move he made was being carefully judged by Gi-beom. As the knife twisted, the man leaned in, but before he could make a move, Gi-beom had already anticipated his every step. Despite the years, Gi-beom's aim was still spot on. The clash of their strengths was enough to make the man rethink any thoughts of a direct confrontation, but to Gi-beom's surprise, another uninvited guest appeared, Dae-yeong, the one who had earlier beaten him up. Upon seeing Gi-beom, Dae-yeong's eyes were cold, filled with deadly intent. He suspected Gi-beom was planning to go out and commit another crime. Little did he know, there were eyes watching him, two eyes as sharp as knives. But as Dae-yeong shifted his focus from Gi-beom, he quickly realized something wasn't right.
내 뒤에 누가 있냐?
궁금하면 돌아보시든가.
As usual, Hee-joo sat on the rooftop of the building across from her mother's house, quietly watching her. But today, Something was off. Her mother's house was unusually quiet. Sensing something was wrong, Hee-joo mustered the courage to go check on her mother. What she discovered was the most painful sight of all. Her mother, devastated by her adoptive father's death, had taken her own life by ingesting poison.
또 말없이 가네.
Witnessing her loved ones die one by one filled Hee-joo's heart, already consumed with hatred, with even more rage and turmoil. She blamed everything on Gi-beom. Therefore, punishing Gi-beom became her most pressing need. The appearance of that man filled her with doubt. It wasn't until Hee-joo went through Gi-beom's past case files that she realized the killer wasn't just one person. He was likely working with someone else. The methods of the two were eerily similar, with one preferring stabbing and the other cutting. Hee-joo quickly obtained the man's records. Thanks to his easy access to the police station, she discovered that it was this man who had reported Gi-beom, leading to his arrest. Clearly, the two shared a tense relationship, so much so that their rivalry was now a matter of life and death. Hee-joo realized that the first 3 murders Gi-beom was accused of were actually committed by the man. He was the one framing Gi-beom. She suspected that the person who had reported him back then was none other than this man. Realizing the animosity between the two, Hee-joo came up with a new plan. She went to a pet store and bought a dog chain designed for a fierce dog, then had a truckload of empty beer bottles delivered to the man's house. She waited quietly for him to return. When the man returned home that night, he found that the power was out. Groping around for a candle, he suddenly felt a sharp pain underfoot. Looking down, he saw the floor was covered in broken glass. As the lights flickered on, he looked up to find Hee-joo had been waiting for him all along.
누구세요?
Hee-joo had placed wires all throughout the pile of glass shards, just in case. Using her high-level criminal intellect, she easily took down the killer. The man was the one who enjoyed slicing open his victims. Afterward, Hee-joo quietly moved the body. She knew exactly where to dispose of it, Gi-beom's bed. When Gi-beom finally lay down to rest, he sensed something was off. He pulled back the covers and was shocked to find a body wrapped in them, with a dog chain around its neck. What seemed unbelievable to him was that the body was none other than his enemy's. Not only had he died in Gi-beom's bed, but his face had been brutally mutilated. As Gi-beom wondered what had happened, Hee-joo suddenly leaped from behind and swiftly subdued him. Before he could react, Hee-joo used another dog chain to choke Gi-beom, not intending to kill him, but to knock him unconscious. Her goal was twofold: to stage a confrontation between the two killers and frame Gi-beom for the murder. Then, she would call the police and have him arrested. However, despite all her planning, she hadn't anticipated that Gi-beom would wake up early. When the police arrived at the scene, they rushed into the room, only to find the man's body, but Gi-beom was nowhere to be found. The only clue left behind was fresh blood on the bed. Dae-yeong, upon seeing the blood still warm, deduced that Gi-beom hadn't escaped. He immediately ordered the hotel to be locked down and every room searched. They were determined to find him, and, much to their surprise, they made an unexpected discovery. In another room, a man and a woman, both covered in blood, were found stuffed into a bathtub. Remarkably, they were still alive. The police quickly rushed the pair to the hospital for treatment. As the paramedics called out to the conscious woman, she woke up with a look of pure terror. Glancing frantically at the side, she desperately tried to signal to them, but they mistook her reaction for shock. What they didn't realize was that Gi-beom was quietly warning her to stay silent.
피해자랑 피살자랑 차이가 뭔 줄 알아? 말을 할 수 있다와 없다야.
살려줘.
This clever trick allowed Gi-beom to slip out of the hotel undetected, giving him another opportunity to kill innocent people. Meanwhile, Dae-yeong, who was at the crime scene, was pondering how Gi-beom managed to escape when he noticed a trail of blood under the bed. Upon lifting the mattress, he discovered the true owner of the room had been murdered right there. Gi-beom had already left without a trace. After executing his plan, Hee-joo believed that even if Gi-beom wasn't caught, he was now a wanted murderer, and the situation would soon resolve itself. She could focus on fulfilling her own dreams. However, she was stunned to find a headline in the newspaper. The police had already determined that Gi-beom was not the true killer. He had been under constant surveillance, and there was solid proof of his alibi. The paramedics who treated the victims had all perished, and with no witnesses to contradict him, Gi-beom remained the prime suspect, still wanted by the authorities. Frustrated, Hee-joo was determined that this monster must pay for his crimes. Though Gi-beom knew the police couldn't touch him, he realized that in order to prove his innocence, he had to figure out who had been framing him all along. So, he went to an internet cafe to search for clues. It didn't take long before he discovered that one of the victims who had been framed in recent news had a wife who had just committed suicide. To his shock, the deceased woman was the wife of the police officer he had killed 15 years ago, and they had a daughter. Based on her age and height, it seemed she matched the description of the woman who had attacked him earlier. This revelation hit him like a lightning bolt. Just as he was about to dig deeper into Hee-joo's connection, his smoking at the internet cafe drew the attention of other customers. The internet cafe owner knew the man wasn't someone to be messed with and initially wanted to avoid trouble. However, when he remembered the recent wanted fugitive, he realized the man looked strikingly similar. The internet cafe owner noticed something was off about him and decided to quietly call the police. Dae-yeong, who was nearby, rushed to the scene. However, when he arrived, Gi-beom was nowhere to be found. The only things left behind were a half-smoked cigarette and an unattended computer. After checking the temperature of the cigarette butt, Dae-yeong confirmed that Gi-beom was still inside the internet cafe. Without wasting a second, Dae-yeong drew his gun and ordered everyone to press up against the wall. He began to search methodically, but Gi-beom, hiding in the back, seized the opportunity and launched an attack. He swiftly evaded Dae-yeong and bolted out, bumping into a rookie cop on his way out. Seeing the rookie hesitate to shoot, Gi-beom quickly lunged at him, stabbing him in the chest with a sharp blade before fleeing in a car. However, he didn't kill the rookie. Knowing that killing a cop in Korea would create much bigger problems, he performed some quick first aid on the officer to prevent him from dying, then used Dae-yeong's car to confidently slip into the police station, completely unnoticed by the guards. It turned out that the most dangerous place was also the safest. Gi-beom's purpose at the police station wasn't just to return the car, it was to search for Hee-joo's address. Coincidentally, Hee-joo was still at the station, and she saw Gi-beom slipping inside. But rather than alerting the other officers, she decided to remain silent, because Hee-joo knew that capturing Gi-beom now wouldn't be enough to keep him behind bars for life. She prepared her final plan. She anticipated that Gi-beom would try to extract information at the police station, knowing that the rookie officers were easy to deceive. Once he got the address, Gi-beom's target would naturally be Hee-joo. To leave no trace, he habitually used a knife to find his way. However, just as he was about to make his move, the motion sensor lights suddenly went out, and a figure quietly moved toward him. Hee-joo felt the same sense of terror her father must have felt when he was stabbed, and from Gi-beom's words, she confirmed that he was indeed the one who killed her father. Fueled by rage, Hee-joo slammed into him and tried to run out. Even Gi-beom, the killer, was stunned. How could a girl be so resilient, taking a stab wound and still managing to run? Seeing her escape, Gi-beom wasn't about to let her go. He chased after her relentlessly. What was strange, however, was that Hee-joo wasn't running toward the busy city streets. Instead, she headed toward the desolate mountain. Soon, Gi-beom caught up with her and, without hesitation, said something shocking.
죄값 좀 받고 가야지. 예연아.
아저씨는 받았고?
Gi-beom wanted to eliminate his suspicions once and for all. He knew that if he sent Hee-joo to prison, no one would stand in his way from continuing his killing spree. But Hee-joo wasn't going to let him have his way. After stabbing Gi-beom, she continued running and quickly called Dae-yeong. At that moment, Dae-yeong, who was on his way to Hee-joo's house with the team, received her call and immediately turned the team around toward the mountain. However, because of this, Hee-joo was once again caught by Gi-beom. Yet, Gi-beom held back. He didn't want to carry the burden of another murder, especially not of someone raised by the police. He wanted the police to see that they had nurtured a killer just like him. Once Hee-joo realized his intentions, she broke free once again and headed toward the mountains. When Gi-beom arrived, he found Hee-joo calmly swinging on a swing with a determined look in her eyes. She took off her scarf, deliberately tossing it in front of Gi-beom, and told him, "Could you deliver this to Dae-yeong for me?" At this point, Gi-beom started to think Hee-joo was simply insane, not realizing the significance of the collar around her neck. Gi-beom noticed that Hee-joo's swinging speed was increasing, swinging higher and higher.
우리 이제 벌 받을 시간이야. 아저씨도 나도 사람을 죽였으니까.
Confused, Gi-beom still didn't understand what was happening, until the sound of approaching sirens grew louder. That's when Hee-joo quickly looped the dog chain hidden in the iron links around her neck, turning to Gi-beom and saying,
다 네가 죽인 거야. 나도.
Just as Hee-joo's words faded, she let go of the swing. The dog chain, hanging from the swing, tightened instantly. The powerful centrifugal force snapped Hee-joo's neck, leaving her hanging lifelessly from the swing. Gi-beom was stunned, unable to believe that this girl had used suicide as a trap to ensnare him. Not long after, a large group of police arrived, and the shocking scene before them left Gi-beom with no room for denial. Through tense storytelling and deep emotional conflicts, the film explores the delicate balance between revenge, justice, and helplessness. It challenges our preconceived notions of crime and punishment, good and evil, reminding us that each of us may, at some point, become a victim of the system or the master of the path we choose to take. However, this film is not merely about violence and revenge. It is a profound reflection on law and morality. When justice fails to prevail, are there other ways to heal the wounded souls? Thank you all for watching and participating.